let's shred the CFR.
Love it.
Shred it.
Sign me up.
Welcome to GOA State of the Second podcast. My name is John, and today we're joined by the fighting attorneys, the armed attorneys. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Not a climactic intro, but welcome in. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks, who you guys are, and what you guys do.
Sure. So we are, first and foremost, we are firearm attorneys. So I'll share our joint background because it's almost identical. We were both felony prosecutors for Galveston County, Texas, and then went from the DA's office into this very special practice where all we do is Second Amendment work. We do the criminal defense for people who have used self-defense and need a lawyer because they're charged with a crime out of that incident. We are, involved in every aspect of firearms in administrative law, in legislation and bill drafting here in the state of Texas. And it is it's what we do.
Yeah. And I'd say apart from, what you see a lot of lawyers who sue the federal government, there's a lot of glory and great headlines. Unfortunately, we're down in the, mopping things up in the trenches with folks who have had to actually use their firearm in self-defense or use some kind of force in self-defense. So it's not as glorious, but it's, you need a lot of different, the law is a sword and a shield. And so we find ourselves kind of just in the trenches with everyday people who find themselves on the worst day of their life having to use force or deadly force. And that's kind of where we find ourselves.
Yeah, we definitely need people like you guys in there. Self-defense of the gun with a gun is a constitutional right, and we love that you guys are doing that. We're going to start off real quick before we go too deep in. We got to thank our gift sponsors. So you guys will be receiving a gift from Palmetto State Armory and AAC. They're sponsoring our gifts for our guests this season 2 of State of the Second. So you guys will be receiving something from them here shortly. Again, we want to thank Palmetto State Armory for everything they have done for the Second Amendment and for supporting GOA.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome. I love them. They just announced that earlier, so we're going to have season 2 gifts for everybody. So we're going to get to our first segment, which is rapid fire questions. That's brought to you by Blackout Coffee. Check out GOA's no compromise roast at Blackout Coffee. Get your caffeine and freedom from Blackout Coffee, available at the GOA store as well as on Blackout Coffee's website. So I'm going to ask you guys 5 questions. You can answer them as briefly or as long as you want. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is your go-to pizza topping?
I'm a weirdo.
What is it?
I'm a weirdo. Olives.
Oh,
I love olives.
Whole?
No.
Okay.
But green.
All right. I'm pretty simple. I'm a simple person. Pepperoni mushroom.
Pepperoni mushroom. Okay. Do you watch more of TikTok or YouTube?
YouTube.
Yeah. TikTok's a Chinese spy apparatus.
It's a Chinese spy apparatus. We are very anti-TikTok in this office. Well, not Richard's wife necessarily, so it's all over his house. But
what is the most watched content creator you watch on YouTube?
Ben Shapiro, hands down. Every episode, never miss one.
I probably watch a lot of Tim Pool. Really enjoy Tim's work.
I haven't heard of Tim. Maybe I'm just behind.
Oh, he's great.
Ben, I've heard of watch a lot of Ben, but not Tim yet. Go to EDC.
Well, I'm a lady, so it changes based on my outfit. But so I really love my very favorite gun that I carry whenever I can, which is mostly winter, is an M&P 9C. I love it. I don't know. I know that people hate on M&Ps. I did replace the trigger, which makes it a lot more tolerable. I love it. But then also it's like you got a purse revolver. I think, what is it, a Glock? I think it's a 26 that I carry too when I want something a little bit slimmer, because Dylan my husband steals the 43. So I end up with the 26 a lot. It depends. It depends on your outfit. Do I need a purse gun? Am I wearing a big coat? Do I need something skinny?
Yeah, I carry a Glock 43X. It's just too easy.
I'm with you. I carry, it depends on what I'm wearing. Maybe that makes me different, but there's a rotation. You got to have a rotation of things. Choices are always better. Um,
Well, and I love that the choice of the revolver too makes a big difference for me because like when you throw it in a bag like that Ruger,
Sure.
the LCR, like just right in the purse.
Are you a purse or a fanny pack?
Me?
Yeah. Do you like the fanny?
A purse.
Have you done the fanny pack?
No, I am 38 years old. That I know the younger ones like the fanny packs. I'm too old. I can't pull it off. I'm not young enough to pull it off.
Have you done the fanny pack?
Richard though has a fanny pack. So that's why I was like, oh wait, me? No, wait, he's the fanny pack guy.
I do have a fanny pack. It's red, white, and blue.
I love the fanny pack. That's my go-to carry because I wear basketball shorts everywhere. So fanny pack is the way I roll. Go-to home defense gun.
So I mean, again, my answer is so long, but so I guess
Let's hear it.
here we go. Okay, because I'm the woman, right? And we have kids. So the go-to home defense gun is the FN in my husband's bedside table. And it's suppressed because if you don't, my children are sleeping and they are toddlers, they are hard to get to sleep. But like my job, right? Because like, I mean, I imagine like we are all talking about our home defense plans with your family. My job is to go get the kids and to get the kids to a safe place. His job is to shoot the intruders. So it's the 45s, the FN in his nightstand, and I'm like racing out to get my daughter and then scooping around to get my son, and then we're heading to safety.
My answer is much.
I know. See, I know. I got all.
I have a brace pistol. It's a Daniel Defense. That's my go-to home self-defense gun.
Your wife's getting the kid,
Theoretically, yeah.
right? No.
So that wraps up our rapid fire questions, which brings me into a great topic because you brought it up. Do you recommend people have a home defense plan? Because I've talked to a lot of people, and some of them do, some of them don't. Like, what do you recommend people do in a home defense situation?
You know, I mean, we keep it pretty simple, you know, because like my husband's like, you know, I mean, the closest I've come to being law enforcement is being a prosecutor. My husband's not law enforcement. He's a great shot. He was a nationally ranked pistol shooter in college. But so we keep it as simple as like, we talk about like, okay, you know, someone's going to come in. We know in our house what part's most vulnerable. This is where someone's going to come in. We talk about where we diverge, how we keep the kids safe, and then we practice it once or twice. Like I'll practice like grabbing the key because we have to go through a back door for me to get to one of the kids, and like I'll practice it. So I've got the muscle memory, but I think it's great. That's as much as we do. What do you guys do?
Well, a lot of it has to go into programming your smart house to play Welcome to the Jungle, to turn on the strobe light and the smoke machine. But no, but in all seriousness, I mean, we have general plans, strategic defensive positions we've identified inside of the house.
Well, you're going to shoot your spouse if you don't. I mean, if your plan is get the home defense gun and keep yourself safe, because this is Texas and it's a cattle-starving state, and if you come in, you're going to die. You got to make sure you don't accidentally shoot your spouse. I mean, it's really important, I think, to have that plan.
I'm with you. I have our set of plans. I've got 2 strategic positions because we've got a front and a back door. I know our house, the way it's set up is we have a loft, or upstairs is a loft. So I've got firing positions, and it's the wife goes to the closet in the master bedroom, calls 911, and there's her handgun and a shotgun in there in case. And I told her, if it's not my voice, or if it is my voice, please don't shoot through the door.
Yeah.
So, and I love talking that with people because there's a lot of people who just go home defense situation, don't really think about the planning. And then you start talking about the plan and muscle memory and go running through drills. And they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, no, be prepared. You run fire drills in your house, don't you? They're like, no, I don't run fire drills. Well, then that's your problem.
Yeah. And then I would say a key aspect that a lot of folks leave out of their plan is, all right, you have a dead body in your living room because you just had to stop someone. What do you do now?
Mm-hmm.
And so even coming up with a plan with, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're calling 911. Here are the things that we're saying. This is how we're preparing the house for when the police arrive. Theoretically, you know, assuming the scene is safe, separating yourself from a firearm. You know, what are you going to say to the police? Are you calling an attorney? Do you know who you're going to call? Because not having a plan at 3 a.m. with your eyes adjusting, the light in your ears ringing, that's not the time to crack open the phone book.
What do you do with your gun that keeps you safe, but also isn't committing another crime by tampering with evidence? I mean, you have to have thought about all those things.
Well, that gets me into the meat and potatoes of this podcast about who you guys are, what do you guys do, all that stuff. So let's start off like you guys were both criminal defense. You've defended a lot of people who have gotten in self-defense shooting. So let's kind of go through, first off, go ahead and go full intro on yourself and kind of explain it, and then kind of go through like because a lot of people don't know what happens when you do get into a self-defense shooting or a home defense shooting.
You want to talk about the channel, and then we'll talk about...
Yeah. So, and that's part of why we started the Armed Attorneys. You can find us on Armed Attorneys on YouTube, is just a little bit of myth busting, say talking to lawyers. That's not a lot of fun generally. But we try to put things in plain English. And the problem is, if you just read the law, then you're not going to be, you don't have enough information to make an informed decision, because part of this is seeing how it applies, seeing how courts have interpreted things, knowing how other cases have, the outcomes of other cases. So there's a lot of experience that informs the law that I think a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah. And knowing like the personality of the chief law enforcement officers in your area too, which can be a really important piece of that puzzle, to have like talk to a lawyer who says, well, the judges here are like this, and this chief prosecutor is like this. And if, this law enforcement agency gets called out, they're going to be cooperative with this, but they hate this. I mean, there's a lot that goes in.
Yeah. And so, a lot of this kind of just background on self-defense in general, because a lot of people learn it the hard way. It's a justification that excludes what would otherwise be a crime. General rule, can't shoot people, can't point guns at people, can't assault people, can't run people over with your cars. But sometimes it's critically important because you have to save your life, you have to save your loved ones. And so I think a lot of people, they always, as simple as a question of, hey, if I shoot somebody who breaks into my house, am I going to go to jail? I don't understand why people are getting arrested for this. It's because guess what? You get charged with the crime. You get charged with the murder, with the aggravated assault. And then, depending on your state, depending on your self-defense rights, the burden's maybe even on you as the self-defender to persuade a jury that what you did was reasonable and immediately necessary. Because an affirmative defense, and that's how self-defense works in virtually every single state, it's a defense that you raise at your trial, in front of a trial judge or trial jury. And so in the meantime, you've potentially gotten arrested, dragged through the system for years, and then you find yourself at trial. And, we talk to folks that even if they're acquitted, they're found not guilty, they do not feel like winners because the process is the punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that a lot of people talk about the self-defense triangle, that the things you have to have in there to cause, for the causation to have a self-defense scenario. Can you guys dive into that a little bit real quick?
Yeah. We actually use very, very similar. We have a little teeny tiny differences, but greatly we appreciate and are informed by Andrew Branca. The way that he analyzes a self-defense case. We talk to hundreds and help hundreds of people a year, and his factors hold up really well under those. And so his factors are innocence, imminence, proportionality, reasonableness, and avoidance. And once you start, if you have all five of those, guess what? You got a rock solid self-defense case, and we can talk about those elements in a little bit more detail and what they mean. But once you start losing one or multiple of these things, it can really start messing up a self-defense case. And what you'll find is the vast majority of self-defense cases out there, they're not, black and white. I would say the overwhelming majority, 95% of self-defense cases are in that gray area where, hey, guess what? You're going to have a fact finder, a jury, a judge determine, all right, was this justified or not justified?
Yeah, no, it is, and that's where, I think, when we talk about the law behind self-defense, generally your legal factors, right? Were you reasonable? Was it immediately necessary? Was it, in response to a life threat? That's great, but it's that Branca factor, avoidance, that really, and clean hands too, right?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really trip people up, because those aren't written into the law, but they're probably the single most important factors in your jury. Your law says you have to act proportionally. Your jury says you better not have started that whole nonsense that ended in you having to use deadly force. And that's probably not the law telling you, but man, those 12 people sit there, and if they don't like what you did, the black and white letter of the law is not going to save you.
Yeah, so the triangle, you'll see that written into law. Those two factors, just to give a little bit more background on them. We call it innocence. That's, juries like it when someone is just beat bopping along, minding their own business, and then they're forced to respond to a threat. They do not like to see a defender who kind of started this chain of events that led to a use of force or deadly force. And so, what does that look like? Is it, do you lose innocence if your car is getting burglarized out on the street and you go outside? Maybe. Right? If you're pumping gas and somebody pulls a gun on you, are you innocent? Are you just beat bopping along? Yes. All right. So you see how that can play out in a few different scenarios. And then that avoidance. And really, when we talk about avoidance, is there a reasonable, safe alternative to using force or deadly force? It's just going to depend on the circumstances. And sometimes the answer is no. Hey, look, you got your back in the corner. You got to act right now. And juries will give a lot of grace to folks if they're backed into a corner. But if there was some alternative, that is always going to hang in their mind. And it's even as silly as it sounds. We have states that are stand your ground. You have no legal duty imposed to retreat. And jurors are told, hey, guess what? You can't consider this person's failure to retreat, so long as they're not breaking the law, they're in a place they're legally allowed to be.
Right. And they don't think about a purple elephant.
Yeah, they just can't help themselves.
They can't help it.
They're told not to think about it, and they can't help themselves. And so that's why that factor, outside of the triangle is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, moving, and again, where I originally lived had just passed stand your ground right when I left, but moving to like a freer state like Arizona, where I live now, it's technically not a stand your ground state. It's a no duty to retreat state. And the laws from state to state are also play a factor if you have reciprocity when you're going from state to state. And a lot of people don't really understand that as well. I mean, let's just say, we get into a self-defense shooting, and we'll just blanket this. What is the steps to get an attorney? Because you get a phone call, you call an attorney, you figure you can find them in the yellow pages. Not all attorneys are the same. So, you call somebody, they might be a real estate attorney or this. What's the steps after that you have to go into?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is tough to find an attorney who practices firearms and self-defense law who will answer your call at 2 a.m. It's tough. There are lots of services out there that provide that, lots of insurance type services, lots of, prepaid legal type services. Do your research. They're not all created equal, but that's a really good way to get that. And beyond that, maybe you can find a firearms or a criminal defense attorney who will take, like a micro retainer from you. And you say, listen, this is so that I can call you in this circumstance, and I want you to pick up the phone. Without an attorney, though, because you're right. If you just start from scratch, I mean, if you're calling your great uncle who does mostly wills and probate in the middle of the night because you shot somebody, he might take your call. He's not going to be able to help you. In the absence of having an attorney to help you right then, you really need to be able to, you need to have, just like you plan your home defense we were talking about earlier, you need to plan that response until you can, go to jail, get bonded out. Then you need to start doing your research, and you need to find an attorney who actually practices the self-defense laws and has taken and successfully defended self-defense cases in the past. And do you want to talk about maybe the plan if you don't have an attorney?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for those folks who, let's say, all right, and I would say this is a good foundation, regardless of whether you have one of those services or what attorney you're going to call following a self-defense incident. I mean, foundational to all of this are, how do you make your 911 call? What do you say when the police come on scene? What happens if you're arrested? And how to respond in each of those kind of 3 scenarios. Because I'll say, in most of these criminal cases, the first few hours, it's going to be very hectic, very overwhelming. But once you've, been released from jail, the whole system really slows down, almost painfully slow. And so, best practices for a 911 call, it's really about minimizing your exposure to law enforcement. So things that we tell people to say: name, location, hey, I need police, EMS. You'll hear disagreements in the community about this next step, but this is my experience. A short, truthful statement about the defensive incident. And when I say short, I mean like 5 or 6 words. Someone just broke into my house and I had to defend myself. Some people will say, I was in fear for my life. We don't like that.
No.
It sounds rehearsed. It sounds played out. Police aren't into it. Prosecutors disregard it. Juries they are numb to it. So we think that kind of solves that problem. Short, truthful statement about the defensive incident, but again, short, and then hanging up the phone immediately. In the moment, a lot of people don't know this. When you call 911, the moment you hit dial, the phone is ringing. It records it immediately. The phone is already recording. So everything you're saying is being recorded. And why is this 911 call so stinking important? This is typically the first exhibit in a trial.
Yeah, it states one.
Yeah, it states one because this is a trial it's telling a story, and what kicks off the story, or how does law enforcement get involved? It's that 911 call. So a lot of times they do this chronologically. They want to start with the first call, and so this is a key piece of information. And we think about all these kind of marketing tricks people play on people. Anchoring. We're human beings. We kind of latch on to the first piece of information that we get, and then we orient our opinion about something or our thoughts about something completely around that piece of information. So we see why this is so stinking important. And then the next step, hanging up the call.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can, your next call should be an attorney, but we'll go back to that foundation. If you don't have an attorney, just knowing your rights and how to stand on them, once the police arrive, that's where I think we should go.
Yeah. And then, again, once the police arrive, if you don't have if you have been able to speak to an attorney, great. They've probably helped you with a short statement. But if you've not, there's really not much. I mean, staying totally silent, probably not necessary, depends on the facts. This guy attacked me. I want to help you as much as possible, but I cannot give any further statement until I've had an opportunity to speak to a lawyer. Being rude to police is never going to work in your favor. And then in the absence of, we don't like, I was in fear for my life. It doesn't sound good. The government's onto it, basically, is something that sounds rehearsed. It's something that, you went through in your head beforehand, and perhaps didn't really feel. But things like, I knew he was going to kill me, or I was going to die. I knew I was going to die tonight. That's great. That says the exact same thing. It satisfies the element, and it sounds so much more natural and so much more truthful. So if you can get that out and he attacked me, and then I can't give you any further statement, you are doing better than 99% of people.
Yeah. And it's important, apart from that, let's say you get arrested, right?
Which you might.
Yeah, which you very well might. I mean, and that's the thing about self-defense. You're not saying I didn't do it. You're saying I did it and I had a really good reason to. And so do the police have, probable cause to arrest you for, in this case, let's say murder? Yeah, there's a dead guy. You're saying you did it. Like, they have enough information to arrest you if they want to.
Yeah.
But let's say they make an arrest. It's very important that folks know how to invoke the right to remain silent and invoke their right to an attorney. Invoking a right to remain silent, actually saying, I invoke my right to remain silent, and then remaining silent. And why do you do that? The courts require it. If you just are quiet, the courts are going to let all this post-arrest silence in at trial. It looks really weird. And so you got to be very, very careful. How do you invoke your right to an attorney? I invoke my right to an attorney. That's exactly how you do it. Don't mince words. It can't be unequivocal. You have to make, you can't be wishy-washy about it. I think I should get a lawyer. That's not going to satisfy it.
I'm not talking to you without a lawyer. That'll work.
Yeah, that'll work. And so, I mean, if you get that defense out, limiting your exposure, invoking your rights, I mean, like Emily said, you're going to be better off than 99.99% of people.
Now, I've got 2 questions, so I'm going to hold off on the one. So you guys are educating the public on this. We've seen a bunch of new gun owners and things like that. How do we reach out to them and start educating on some of this? And this is where it ties into my second question, is the myths of self-defense, the myths that you've heard. We've all heard old granddad who said, well, if you shoot him in the doorway, you drag him in the house, which we all know that's tampering with evidence. But we've heard these myths and things like that. So first off, let's start with the education of the public and how to get these new gunners to understand the self-defense laws, and then kind of tie into some of those myths and misnomers that they've heard over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we hope that our content and that creators like you and creators, out there providing this information, there are lots. There are
Yeah.
lots, and we know most of them personally, and it's great. And we hope that that's something that's hitting the radar of new gun owners. I think that there's a lot of outreach being done at ranges with instructors, sort of pushing good legal content to instructors as well. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and as far as myths go, and that's important. I mean, we talk to instructors every single week about, hey, how do I explain this to our class? Or I'll talk to new gun owner who is like, I just talked to this instructor and they said the craziest thing, maybe even the dragging the body into the house. Yeah. I mean, you'd be really surprised. And why myth busting is really important. Well, to that example specifically, hey, guess what? When the police come out and the physical evidence doesn't match, like that doesn't take rocket science. When the physical evidence stops matching, your credibility goes through the floor, and all right, now you're looking at spending the rest of your life in prison. So, those types of things, I think people erroneously think, hey, I'm going to get more self-defense rights. It was inside of my house. No.
And, oh boy, there's just so much that can go wrong. There's so much that can go wrong. I mean, Richard knows I'm preparing for a murder trial right now. It's going to happen in a couple weeks here. And despite the fact that he did not put himself in the situation, someone started burglarizing his property. He did all of these things, and I don't want to talk about it too much because it still hasn't gone to trial, but he did all of these things that when he explains it, I'm like, oh, okay, I understand why you did that. I understand why you moved this. I understand why you touched that. I understand why you ran this way. I understand why you fired this shot. But on the whole, in the aggregate, it's like, oh, it's like every little thing that he could have done sort of improperly, he did. And then you hear his story and you're like, I get it, but man, and luckily he had lawyers on the scene that night, which is one of the things that I think is going to save us at trial. But again, perfectly innocent on his part. Property's being burglarized. He goes, responds, ends up killing one of the burglars. And yet it is like a comedy of errors that, I think we're going to get out of, but it can be really tough and really easy to jam yourself up.
And that's and I'll just say, I mean, those types of cases are the absolute, I mean, they're the absolute worst. Yeah. And it's the norm because it's all or nothing. It's like you are either justified, you're a free man, you're going back to the free world, or, hey, maybe you're spending the rest of your life in prison. There's no real in between on these cases.
Mm-mm.
Now, I've heard, we've talked about this, and I learned this when I was teaching, but you may get pushed off on, found acquitted or justified in your defensive shooting, but we always see that district attorneys and things like that always have their win-loss records that they're looking at, and you might be charged with something silly. How often do you guys see something like a discharging of a firearm in a city limits or something silly just so that defense attorney gets, or the district attorney gets their win-loss record a little boosted?
A lot.
Yeah.
The government loves to get its pound of flesh, and they know that they can coerce you into it because ultimately, I mean, I just had this happen, and I just had a very recent case in Houston in which the guy was accused. There was a road rage incident. He's accused of displaying a firearm. He actually didn't, not in the way that they accused him of, but it's Texas. Everybody's got a gun in their car. So you call and say, someone flashed a gun at me. The police are going to find a gun in the car. And that's all it takes. And so despite the fact that there was not very much evidence, you look at that case and you say, okay, we're going to trial. What's the worst thing that could happen? You could go to prison for 20 years. Or the state's going to give you this misdemeanor and you get to stay out in the free world. And maybe that misdemeanor gets dismissed after a couple of years on probation, but they want something from you. And they know that even an innocent man's going to say, I can't risk 20 years in prison. I'll take the little ticky-tacky thing you're going to give me so that you get your pound of flesh, and I'm not taking the risk. And it happens constantly.
Yeah, and as a gun owner, so we've heard a lot, and I've heard a lot of stories like that where people get blamed for brandishing. As a gun owner, what's the, I guess, best way to combat that? if something happens where somebody accuses you of brandishing, is there a way to combat that?
Yeah, I mean, we have ideas.
We have ideas.
But I'll say the context that this comes up in overwhelmingly is road rage.
Mhm.
And juries, prosecutors, police, they hate road rage cases. We spend probably too much time as like a public service telling people, please stop pulling your guns on the roadway. Because, talking about that last element of avoidance, hey, guess what? You're in your big, safe metal movable box. Why didn't you just slow down or get off the road or move away? So, I mean, juries are very unsympathetic to it. And so those are really precarious cases. But I think we have a solution.
We do have a solution. Yeah. So your car gun should be wild. It should be bedazzled. It should be pink sparkles. It should be Ghostbusters with Slimer painted on the side of it in neon green. I mean, it should be whatever is going to make it so unique and so recognizable, because when that guy calls, when you didn't actually display the fire, so if you display the firearm, it better be justified because they're identifying it. But when you didn't, and that guy calls because he says, I see the NRA sticker on the back of his truck. I see the GOA
It was
sticker.
black or silver.
I see the, yeah, right. I see the, we protect the second sticker on the back of his truck. They're going to say, he pointed a black handgun at me or a silver handgun.
Yeah.
And then when you're like,
yeah,
check out the pink sparkles in my center console.
Yeah, it's Hunter Orange.
Yep.
I love that. My go-to new carry gun is the GOA Canic. Have you seen that one yet?
No.
It is silver top with blue and red all over it, so it is very noticeable on what it is.
Nice.
Perfect.
So, and I've talked to people about that, and a lot. That is a big fear as a gun owner. You mentioned stickers on the back of cars and things like that. I'm anti-sticker on the back of my vehicles. What are you guys?
What do you hate, the First Amendment?
Well,
Yeah.
No, we are very anti-sticker too, and that's what everyone says to us.
No, and we, this was probably one of our first videos. It was titled "Take Down Your Funny Gun Signs." They create, and when we talk about just firearm stuff, firearms accessories, these things, we break them into two categories of function enhancing and non-function enhancing. Function enhancing would be an example of like a modified trigger or maybe an optic, something that makes you more lethal, get on target. Those are all very easily explained at trial. And non-function enhancing modifications, think about engraving "Smile Mother Effer" around the barrel, or I think these signs fall into that second category. It's a tangential accessory where it just kind of creates a needless issue at trial.
Yes. The murder case I'm going to trial on in 2 weeks, there was I don't even know if you know this, there was a sign up on his property that said, "We shoot." And that doesn't look good when the state's like, well, you did, and then you went and you murdered him in cold blood afterwards. So it's not good. And does it mean that he didn't act in self-defense? No. Do I want to explain it to a jury? No. And I'm going to
you say, look, these people were on notice that if they went in this property, they were taking their life into their own hands.
Sure.
And they knew.
And then when the state says he waited there and he hunted him down like animals because they had stolen from him before, and he's got that sign up and he's just been thinking about killing them for the last 2 months that was, and I'm going to say,
You're
not that.
You're very persuasive.
Well, and that brings up the point of like people with we don't call 911 front door mats and things like that. I like expressing.
Keep honking, I'm reloading.
Yeah. Like my doormat says, "Please don't ring the door. You're going to disturb the dog." So, like I've joked and I'm like, "Oh, I'll get one of these stickers or something, and it'll be funny on the inside." And then I think more and more about it. I'm like, wait, if I actually have to use my gun in self-defense, what is state evidence number 5 where they pull this up and go, "Hey, look at this"?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, we've seen good examples where, all right, because at trial, a trial in guilt and innocence, it's kind of like a black and white photograph. Did this happen? Did this not happen? And the court's job is to exclude, the general rule is relevant evidence comes into trial. If it's not relevant, it's excluded, but there's still exceptions to that rule. And so if it falls in one of these exceptions, we've seen cases where, all right, absolutely, this stuff gets tossed out. It doesn't come into trial. It doesn't make an issue. But we've seen lots of cases where, it makes its way into court. I mean, Emily had a case where self-defense incident, singular firearm, and they wanted to parade this guy's entire gun collection in front of the jury to just scare him and say, hey, like, this guy's a gun nut. But what did the court decide?
Yeah, well, luckily the court kept that out, but it was a fight. It was a real battle. And the thing is that it's not just, and people don't realize, it's not just your stickers. It's not just the signs around your house. Everything you post on social media is potentially dangerous for you, because that is almost, I mean, the court's going to do a balancing test to see if it's more prejudicial than probative, but I mean, it's a statement of a party opponent. It is your words. And so the chances that the judge is going to let that into court are pretty darn high. So every time you get on Facebook and you post, Second Amendment something or other, and then, talking about how, well, I would definitely do this, or who was it? It was Daniel Perry in Austin sent messages about how he would handle protesters, which, you don't think anything of it until you actually
have to handle protesters.
Until you have to handle a protester. And then the government pulls that out. It gets admitted to trial. And that man was convicted on the basis of his messages, not on what he did. And so, I mean, you got to be really, really cautious about everything you put out there, because Lord forbid you have to use self-defense and then it comes back to haunt you.
And it's an uncomfortable conversation, because obviously we don't believe in censorship. We don't believe in self-censorship. But you have to, and it's all about a risk calculation.
Mm-hmm.
If you're comfortable with this having a state's exhibit sticker on it and put in front of a jury, go nuts. And even if it's maybe some people's tolerances are extremely high, but I think the ultimate decision should be with the individual. Hey, this needs to be a calculated risk decision. We just don't want people kind of wandering into it. If you've made a risk calculation, go nuts,
mm-hmm.
right? But if you're just doing it without any kind of contemplation about how could this be used against me, that's where we see people get in a lot of trouble.
Oh, and I mean, I'll say, Richard and I are out there on the internet advising people about gun law, and like my personal social media is, first of all, totally locked down. But I don't post anything.
No, I don't post anything.
I mean, there's nothing about the Second Amendment. There's nothing about guns. I leave that to our channel. And even the channel scares me, because I think, if I have to ever defend myself, the government is going to pour through.
Poor intern.
I know, whatever government intern it is, and find every time I've said something inflammatory, like, oh yeah, I definitely kill someone for blah, blah, blah. And they are going to use that against me. And I mean, it's the risk that we take, because it's part of our business now. But I fully am aware that they're going to use that.
I'm in big, big trouble then. No, I'm just kidding. So we are about at the halfway point. We're going to go to our next segment, which is From the Soapbox. That's where we talk policy, politics, biggest frustrations, gripes with the ATF, all the above. This is brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Again, use GOA for 1 month free of Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile is a pro-freedom wireless network using the same cell towers as the big wireless companies. Again, for 1 month free, use code GOA. So, guys, what is your From the Soapbox topic you want to touch on today?
Richard?
Well, I mean, we're about to start the 89th legislative session here in Texas, so we're pretty policy focused. We got involved with GOA not too long ago, 2021 is kind of when we started working with GOA. We're their legislative council here in the state of Texas, so all these great GOA bills that you see that come out of our office, we're down at the Capitol. We're down at the Capitol for most of the session trying to get these things over the finish line. And there's a lot of interesting things going on that we're working on. Big things are, and it's tough because Texas, it feels like a lot of wind was taken out of the sails. Once we had constitutional or permitless carry passed here in Texas, everybody.
Thank you, GOA.
Thank you, GOA. That was GOA. Everybody, I feel like everybody's like, all right, we won. Let's go home. But we have, if you could see this, we have 10 lifetimes of changes we need to make to Texas law in order to make it comply with the Second Amendment. That's how much stuff we have to do. So we are full steam ahead. There's a ton of things that we need to look at. And I would say the things that we're really focused on this session are bolstering self-defense, improving defenders' rights, protecting them on the criminal side, protecting them on the civil side. And then there's a lot of other fun issues that just need to get addressed.
I just to give you a taste of some of the small things, for example, we have insurers who are all of a sudden pulling insurance coverage, carriers who are declining to renew gun ranges and clubs and manufacturers. So that's a huge problem we'd like to remedy here. We have Richard, we haven't actually talked much about a bill on this yet, but we have police departments here in Texas refusing to return guns once someone's case is dismissed. And they're doing an ATF e-trace on every single gun and calling it mandatory, even when there's an order and a very angry defense attorney saying, give me the effing gun right now. I would love to have some sort of bill that sanctions the government for that kind of behavior. So, I mean, there is everything you can imagine from, making sure the government doesn't act badly to making sure private companies don't act badly to just fixing the system to make sure that, people don't go broke because they've had to defend themselves and they're fighting civil lawsuits for a decade. So.
Yeah. So like last session, for example, so 2 sessions ago, we got constitutional carry here in Texas. Last session, our big victory was basically banning private gun registries. What we had was the ISO, International Standards Organization. They promulgate these things called merchant category codes. There are transaction numbers associated with whenever you swipe your credit card. They created new transaction codes for firearms, ammunition, and accessories. And, what we saw was the government was using this, maybe the federal government. I don't believe that they don't track firearms, and I fully believe they have a database, but
they don't keep a list.
Sure.
It's illegal to keep a list, Richard. Surely they're not doing it.
But their in round or where they could say, oh, this is how we got the information, was they were going to go to these major credit card companies, and it's a third party. And so you have a lowered expectation of privacy there. And so they would just go and gather the information from these private corporations. And so what we did in Texas is we banned merchants from using those codes, and we made some really stiff penalties if these banks and financial institutions don't comply. Some really, really crazy notification. If they accidentally transmit one of these codes, they have to notify the consumer and the attorney general. And so,
Richard made the bank lobbyists really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I got screamed in my face
for a couple months. They were not happy.
But what we're looking forward in this session, another one that we haven't talked about, Scott Pressler put the word out. We need to have voter registration with license to carry applications.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we need that.
Yes, we do.
So, there's all kinds of, automatic reciprocity here in Texas right now. It's up to the governor. There's only a handful of states we don't recognize. We should recognize everybody. We're looking at how can we move that timeline up from self-defense instead of it being at trial. How can we move it further up in the process so that folks aren't going bankrupt paying for lawyers when they're ultimately justified? We're looking at improving. We have a bunch of scumbag plaintiffs lawyers who that they'll sue self-defenders even when they're found not guilty. Even when their case is dismissed or they're no billed, they're still suing them, saying, hey, you need to pay my guy. Do you have insurance? They just want to want to shake people down for money.
They do. The insurance companies will pay for anything. And particularly someone gets shot, insurance companies lose their minds. They're terrified of it. They are used to slip and falls. They are used to things that are not intentional acts. And despite the fact that because it's an intentional act, they're actually going to be less liable, they freak out. The lawyers freak out. The carriers freak out. And they're like, oh, here's some money. And then it encourages all the scumbag plaintiffs lawyers to keep doing it.
Yeah. So what we're looking at on the civil side is, hey, if a person has been no billed, their case has been dismissed, or they've been found not guilty, that, hey, you cannot recover damages from that person. If you sue that person, you're going to be responsible for their attorney's fees. Mm-hmm. And so we think that that's really going to shut down a lot of these frivolous lawsuits.
You'd hope.
Yes. And then on the self-defense side, and this actually would go for a ton of crimes in Texas, not just self-defense. We're looking at a defense motion to dismiss if an affirmative defense exists. So basically, all right, you're charged with murder. You file a motion to dismiss alleging, hey, the affirmative defense of self-defense is available to me. Burdens on government to prove that self-defense does not apply. If they can't satisfy the judge very early on in the process, then the case needs to be ordered dismissed. So we're really looking at how can we ease this?
Which you would think wouldn't be a tall order because lots of states have something similar. But boy, it is really hard. Once once criminal procedure is entrenched in a state, it is really hard to convince the legislature to change it. And so that's an uphill battle, but I think it's one we're committed to.
Yeah. Some other fun things, decriminalizing short-barreled rifles under Texas law.
Yeah.
Just because right now we are tied to federal law, and anytime we see federal law and state law tied together in Texas, we're always attacking it. We should be completely decoupled from federal law.
Mm-hmm.
Texas should be doing its own thing. And so anything else? What else have we got? I know there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. That's a pretty good summary.
Getting rid of gun-free zones. I mean, we're always going to go for that, So we got a full plate.
It's a full plate.
Well, can I just say God bless Texas on that?
Yeah.
We love suing so people don't know, GOA loves suing in the state of Texas because we normally win most of our cases in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And set precedent.
Go have it heard by Judge Pittman.
Yes. But, touch on a few things. I'm running into my buddy's running into the same issue in Arizona where the his gun got stolen from his vehicle. They caught the guy with it. He had a laundry list of crimes, as long as you can get. This was 2 years ago. He still hasn't gotten his gun back. The state, so a buddy of ours worked for the local PD where it was stolen. He was like, yeah, we got it clear. We're good to go. You get your gun back. And then the other city that he was actually arrested in was like, no, we're going to use this as evidence. So we're going to hold on to this for a while, which is definitely infringing on his Second Amendment right. As we all know, a right delayed is a right denied. So that is a big thing. And I really hope you guys win that in Texas on history, tradition, and tax to show a right delay is a right denied. The other thing is the coming from the state of Ohio where the burden of proof fell upon the state, that was a big thing that really, as a person concealing carrying, that just lifted some ease off your shoulder a little bit, but at the same time, you're like, you still got to defend yourself in court. But the burden of proof falling on the state is always a big win for those who are concealed carrying, and a big win for the Second Amendment overall.
Yeah, I mean that. And in Texas, we do have a scenario where the burden starts on the government, and we call them our legal presumptions of reasonableness. That's use of deadly force in Castle Doctrine locations, occupied home, occupied vehicle, place of employment, in response to some very serious and violent crimes, murder, robbery, aggravated robbery, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, and aggravated kidnapping. So there are scenarios where, the burden starts with the government, but even in those cases, it's a presumption. It's a presumption.
Well, you got to go to trial to get it.
And you got to go to trial to get it. And so, how do you keep someone's life? Because, and this is going back to, hey, this might be a misconception, or this is where new gun owners need to have their head on a swivel. You get charged with a crime. You're showing up to court every single month for possibly years. You're calling into a phone number every day to see if you're randomly getting drug tested. You have all these conditions of bond on you. Maybe you have a ankle monitor that has to go get, checked in every so often. Your employer now sees, hey, you got this charge against you. There's a lot of kind of just collateral consequences associated with it. Even when you're innocent until proven guilty, the way the system kind of feels, it doesn't feel that way.
Mm-mm.
And so just all of this inconvenience and everything, it destroys your life. And so we're trying to minimize that as much as humanly possible with, being able to assert these affirmative defenses earlier. We've seen great cases, you see like Florida and Georgia. They have a law very similar to this. So this isn't like brand new out of the sky. This stuff exists and it works. And so that's what we need for Texas.
SBRs in Texas, you guys are trying to make them legally separated from the federal government. You guys have already got that with suppressors. By doing that in the state of Texas, is there a way to set precedent for the rest of the country to try to get these items off the NFA? And I know we've sued with you guys on pistol braces and stuff like that. One that very overwhelmingly is it. Do we see a path that way through Texas on other NFA items as well?
Well, I think just the biggest thing is the immediate effect of decoupling is if you decriminalize something under state law. And a lot of states, as far as it goes with guns, you see a lot of mirroring between state and federal law. And then if you don't see mirroring, you see, hey, this is a crime if it's a crime under federal law. So when you resolve those conflicts, when you decouple or you don't mirror the federal law, well, guess what? 99% of people don't come into contact with federal authorities. I mean, it's probably even higher than that. And so if you're not coming into contact with federal authorities and it's not a crime under your state law, well, guess what?
And
Liberty.
In the Second Amendment sanctuary,
Right.
for which there are stiff penalties against law enforcement for cooperating with the federal government on
Right.
new federal gun crimes. Thank you again, the state of Texas. You have created a lot of freedom. And so, in part, even without the benefit of litigation, because that's how things get applied nationally, is you start litigating and then it goes up far enough. And then, hopefully the Supreme Court makes a decision, and the holding of which is something that is nationally applicable, not, highly, highly specific. But you see that states, lobbyists and states look at what other states have done. They see what works. They mirror those bills. And so, a bill that is successful in one state can, I think, have far-reaching impact.
Yeah, and to speak on the Made in Texas suppressor law that we have, that was modeled after Kansas, Montana. Anybody? There's maybe was there one?
There is one more, but I can't recall now.
Maybe Wyoming. But Texas tried to. Each of these states tried it, failed for various different reasons. We tried to fix all of those problems.
Try again.
Right now, we are in the process of, hey, don't build a Made in Texas suppressor just yet. The courts have not adjudicated this. That passed back in 2021. We see it's still working, still winding its way through the courts, and we're having some standing issues with the court saying, all right, you have standing to sue on this. So, it is a laboratory. We are trying to figure it out. And it's the kind of the same thing we see with New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin cases. A lot of folks, and I totally get the frustration, you want to snap your fingers overnight and all these infringements go away. That case gave us the framework, and now we have to litigate all of these issues. And once we figure out how to, for example, sensitive place, once we figure out, all right, this is the path to getting this erroneous sensitive place law struck down, guess what? The floodgates are going to open. Same thing with this, list of prohibited people. If these things aren't constitutional, they need to fall. Same thing with firearms restrictions. And so it does take some time, and I understand the frustration, but it's working. There are thousands of cases going on right now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's happening. Ron Paul gif.
Yeah. Well, and one last thing before we wrap up, I want to bring up, we talked about the code for credit card companies. We talked about, ATF not having a registry. And this is one of my favorite stories to bring up because it makes a giant middle finger to the government, and I love it. A friend of mine is a lieutenant for one of the police forces when I was working at a gun store, and he would buy a lot of guns. He had a stack of 4473s, probably about this high, to the point where when we got our audit, they came in and they grabbed his stack of forms, which is a no-no. So they call him down to the ATF office, and he pulls up and he calls the case officer and it's like, hey, come meet me outside. Well, he pulls up in his patrol car and he goes, cool, so you're not allowed to take those forms. Why don't you turn around? I'm going to take you down to the precinct and book you. And the guy's like, oh, we're going to drop this right now. So to say that the ATF is not looking at your forms, I have a feeling that I'm going to get a knock. I know a friend who just got his FFL was under investigation by the ATF because he had done so many transfers in a short period because he does YouTube and does do gun reviews. It's crazy to not think that the ATF is looking at those forms when they're not supposed to be, but they do what they want because it's rule for thee and not for me when it comes to the ATF. And we're hoping with this new presidency and new Congress and new Senate that we will get some reform with the ATF or even try to get rid of them altogether.
The executive direction is so incredibly important for how well the ATF is behaving or not. I will say the guys who are just pounding the streets, they're generally not bad guys. The ones that I interacted with. Yeah,
there's pro-gun ATF agents.
Oh yeah, they exist, and
they like dogs.
State by state, it varies, and jurisdiction by jurisdiction, it varies. About are your guys like, look, I am a gun guy. I'm following my marching orders right now, and I know this is stupid, but this is my job. Versus jackbooted thugs who want to abuse your rights. And it is going to vary. But I do think that there are enough out there who do respect the Second Amendment, do respect firearms, that when you get that new executive in place who is also respectful of the Second Amendment, then, I mean, things change. They change overnight. They change so quickly. And I am so excited for January 20th. I can't even tell you.
Yeah. And then we've seen, I mean, this is, from what I can tell, I mean, this is going to be a legitimate policy direction that the Trump administration intends on taking, with cases like Loper, Bright, Raimondo. I mean, cases that take down Chevron deference, cases like EPA versus West Virginia that addresses major questions doctrine. We have an SEC case about administrative agency. Yeah, Jaworski, about administrative agencies getting to hold these like star chamber courts where they get to adjudicate their own rules. No, guess what? You have a right to have a jury trial by a jury of your peers. So once we see, and I think this is what they're going to do, I mean, we'll see, but when they start not enforcing these regulations that really shouldn't be in place in the first place, and then if there was going to be a subsequent administration to try to come in behind them and enforce them, I mean, we're going to see crazy standing issues on all of these things.
Well, and let's take down the infrastructure.
Yeah.
The regulatory state is mostly illegal.
Yeah.
Let's take down the infrastructure. Let's make it so it is really difficult for that next one who wants to come in and utilize it. Like, let's shred the CFR.
Love it.
Shred it.
Sign me up.
So hashtag abolish the NFA, hashtag abolish the GCA, hashtag abolish all of them. I think I run out of hashtags here, but yes, I agree. We are at that time. My producer is telling me to wrap up. So guys, go ahead and plug away. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, get more information, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, you can find us at youtube.com/armed attorneys or on Twitter at armed attorneys. I still call it the Twitter. It's the X now. We have a Facebook and Instagram. I mean, you're going to find us in a lot of different places, but I'd say the two primary ones are YouTube and X.
And if you are in the state of Texas and you need a criminal defense attorney or firearms legal advice, you can find us at walkertaylorlaw.com. We are licensed attorneys in the state of Texas. That is our full-time job and what we do. So you can always call us there.
Well, guys, again, thank you for being on. I know we had to make some scheduling changes. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Make sure, guys, to like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell for notification, 5-star review on all podcasting hosts, and we will catch you on the next one.